We naturally think of learning as a process of filling in the blanks. We tend to imagine our ignorance as a pure, empty page, and knowledge as the ink we use to map it out. The logic follows that every book we read, every skill we practice, and every fact we memorize colors in a little more of that void. Over time, the blank, unknown areas of our brain should simply shrink. But there is a fatal flaw in this logic. It assumes we actually know where the edges of the page are, that we possess an accurate mental map of our own intellectual limits to begin with. Believing we start with a neatly defined outline of our own flaws walks us directly into one of the most paralyzing psychological traps in human learning. This paradox, where individuals with the least knowledge display the highest confidence, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. The study identified the underlying mechanism: a complete lack of metacognitive skill, or the ability to evaluate your own competence. Think about the rules of grammar. The exact same knowledge you need to write a grammatically correct sentence is required to recognize that you've made a grammatical mistake. If you lack that knowledge, you literally cannot spot your own errors. This raises an unsettling question. If our own incompetence actively hides itself from us, how can any of us be certain we aren't completely incompetent right now? Escaping this loop of overconfidence requires us to completely abandon our reliance on certainty and shift how we evaluate what we think we know. To understand how we escape, we move from human psychology to the philosophy of science, specifically to the work of philosopher Karl Popper. Popper argued that humanity's greatest engine of progress, the scientific method, doesn't actually operate by proving things true. Instead, he introduced the concept of falsifiability. He showed that science operates entirely by systematically attempting to prove theories false, constantly working to locate and eliminate errors. This means our most robust scientific laws are not absolute truths. They are simply the theories that have survived the most rigorous, repeated attempts to destroy them. Popper's framework redefines learning as the grueling process of surviving rigorous doubt, a progress measured by what we subtract rather than what we add. When applied to the individual, this metacognitive equivalent of falsifiability is called intellectual humility. It is the active, rigorous recognition of our own personal fallibility. Thomas Pynchon observed that ignorance possesses its own contours and coherence. It functions as a structured entity that we must actively map. A traditional learner might passively memorize facts to feel smart, carefully protecting their current worldview. An intellectually humble learner actively seeks out the anomalies that break their worldview. Ultimately, intelligence manifests as a highly refined capacity for navigating doubt and mapping the shape of what we do not know. If learning is just the continuous, exhausting discovery of our own blind spots, what exactly is the endpoint of a lifetime of education? In the 15th century, the philosopher Nicholas of Cusa called this endpoint learned ignorance. He argued that recognizing the absolute limits of human comprehension is actually the highest form of wisdom. This sentiment reaches back to the very beginning of Western philosophy and the famous paradox of Socrates. He realized he was only wise because he recognized that he knew practically nothing. History's greatest thinkers consistently arrive at this exact same destination, a profound humility where claiming absolute knowledge is the mark of a fool. We can visualize this philosophical paradox using a geometric model, famously framed by Albert Einstein, and later echoed by astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. Imagine your knowledge as a circle of light in a vast dark void. The inside is what we know. The circumference represents direct contact with the unknown. As knowledge expands, the circumference mathematically grows. The more we learn, the more surface area touches the darkness. Combining this geometry with Karl Popper's rigorous philosophy gives us a stark equation. Because human knowledge can only ever be finite, our ignorance must necessarily be infinite. The ultimate reward for a lifetime of rigorous learning is not the triumphant conquest of ignorance. It is the breathtaking, humbling realization of just how little you actually know.